Alrighty, so when we were working on this car last, me and my dad, just before winter hit and it got too cold, we had already marked the outlines after getting the this big old seat riser out of there. That's too far back in the car to show you, but we can just reposition the light here. This seat riser here was in the middle of the pan. That's got to come out before we can go ahead and mark the cuts. All we had to do when we marked the cuts is lay the new floor pan in there, trace the top line after pushing it down a little bit, and then just move it out of the way, and we've got our, and we already sort of started cutting this just before it got too cold. We have a top line that we made just by setting it down in there, and that goes all the way up to the front edge of the floor where it's mostly solid still, so that part will weld when we weld the new floor pan in up here where it's solid. But that line goes all the way across this rocker around the curve, and we're gonna cut out the seat belt little mounting plate by itself because it's still good metal there, and we don't want to make a new mounting plate because we've already got one. So all we gotta do now is take our handy dandy nibbler right here. It's got these teeth, and it's kind of just a big pair of scissors, and that just cuts right along the edge. And what we did for this second line is we just pushed the pan down a little bit and gave ourselves another line so we don't go too high, just to give ourselves some more wiggle room. So with the combination of the nibbler, a crowbar and drilling out the spot welds all across this flange here for the rocker panel, because there are spot welds every so often along here that from the factory they welded in. So we gotta drill those out, hammer through them, crowbar and hammer. For the rest on this side where there's no spot welds, we use the nibbler. And we should have a good done floor pan out. We'll have an empty hole just like the other side. Alrighty, so through a little bit of pounding with the crowbar and hammer, you can see we got through spot welds all the way up to that flange there, where I left off. Now we gotta get the nibblers out and just cut right up along the corner and along those two top black lines to the flange, and we are good to clean up our surfaces and go on to the next step. But there is a little bit of floor support there. You see on the driver's side, it's this subframe here. So on that side, we'll have to do the same thing. There's spot welds all up along there. We're just gonna take the trusty hammer and crowbar and go ahead and get at it. The nibbler might also help here too. Once we lift enough of the metal, we can just cut away, and then we'll deal with the leftover metal afterwards with a grinder wheel. Alrighty, so we've got our pan all the way from the back here by my leg, all the way around the corner. So there's our top line there that we did it with our original trace, and then after we got it laid in there a little bit better, we got our second line. You can see that we still got to cut up a little bit, but we've got a nice center hole so that we've got some wiggle room in here. We actually gotta get the spot welds out of most of these. Can't just brute force, because sometimes like right here, I was trying to pound through one and it just started ripping the metal, but I got that figured out. But this nibbler, all it is here is like a big pair of scissors. It just scissors right through the metal. It works pretty good. Smooth as butter really on this thin metal here. So we got all the way up there, and I mean, all it does is, as it goes along, it creates these little fun spirals. So we just gotta cut right up along this line. There is, like on that side, a piece of this frame rail that goes right up this center line all the way up here. So we just gotta cut up this line on each side of this frame rail. We'll use it as our guide up to our line, cut across on either side, and we're ready to move on to the next step, which is just basically cleaning everything up and getting it ready for until the next time I'll be able to get in here and clean it up good enough to actually weld in the floor pans with our little welder, but we aren't going to be doing that in this little series here. Okay, so we got all the rest of that section of metal all across this subframe member right here, and that cross joint right there that comes from around the transmission, all taken out, and now we just need to work our way up through the center. And what we're gonna do here, since some of this metal is really thin along here, I was having some issues with it just tearing, so we gotta actually use the drill here when we go up for this floor section, and drill out those spot welds so that we don't have any issues with it tearing, because we'll have to go back and repair this with some spare metal and extra welding, and that's just extra time. So the way we're gonna find where our spot welds are is, you can already kind of see one there. If the lighting was a little bit less harsh on this, it's kind of hard to get good lighting in a garage, but there's a spot weld right here. It's just a little divot, but a good way of finding these is going with a wire brush or wire wheel and just going right up along there. There's another one right there, one right about there, and it's the same thing on this side. Just wire brushed out, and find your spot welds and drill them out, pound up the rest of the metal, cut and remove, and we'll be all set to get on to the next step. Alright, so now that we got all of our floor pan removed that we need to remove for this project, we're just going to take our wire brush, we're going to go around, clean it up as best as we can, and then we're just going to take a can of leftover spray paint from another project. This just happens to be gold Rust-Oleum, nothing special, just shiny, just to give it a coat or two, probably just one for this project. Alright, now that we got everything as clean as it's ever going to get with just a wire brush, you're just going to go a couple inches away from the surface and just give it a couple of light spritzes just on the bare metal. We're just going to try and preserve that line a little bit, and we're just going to do that to the rest of the areas that are bare metal, and we'll be done with this for until we go. Just do this without breathing too much of it in.
Alright, now my voice is going to be a little bit muffled here because I've got a mask on, because there's still a lot of fumes going on in here. So if it's not that bad, that's alright. If you can't hear me, that's alright. But the basic gist of this is, we got all that we need covered to be covered. The support rail, right there where I showed you doing it, a little bit of the edges over here, and then this edge of the rocker on the inside here. I can't really get a good angle, but that's all coated too, just so that it doesn't rust anymore. And when we come back to this project later, we're just going to take a grinder with a grinder wheel on it, or maybe a wire wheel, and just give it a little bit of a once over, and it'll be good to get working on again. But that's what's going to do it for this episode, for my senior project series.